The thing is the thing happened. It stained us. It did its job in a sense by separating us by color. But the thing that we can do, which Dr. King strived for, because he wasn't striving for a raceless society, he was striving for a society that inevitably operates on race, and for us to do our duty as individuals and as a whole to see people for their character, not their skin, because he knew inevitably you're going to see their skin. Implicit biases are going to pop up, but it's your job not to be lazy and rely on those, but to get to know people and rely on their character. And if you get to know their character and you think they suck and you don't like them, then you can hate them because of their character, but don't hate them just because they're white or black or Asian or etc. And so that is where I am. That school of thought I'm in. I see it as, yeah, race did separate us, but it's here to stay. In the same sense as I say, yeah, Eve bit that apple and she, created this whole issue, but sin is here and it's here to stay. And it's up to me whether or not I decide to serve God and to hope to have an eternal life. I can't be like, but God, it's not my fault. Eve bit the apple, dude. Like, it's not me. Like, I didn't create this sin. She did. It doesn't matter. What's done is done. And same with race. It doesn't matter the fact that we're separate. It matters on how we now reframe and refashion how we treat each other, despite the fact that we are separated in these categories. And that, to me, I feel it's, I don't want to say pointless, but I want to say we can spend our time more on focusing on implicit biases and changing that and destroying that in a realistic way than trying to tear down a structure that has been here long before we have, that's been here for 500 years or more. That one isn't bad. It just depends on how you operate on it and in it and see people through it. Like, I can connect with so many different people because of their different cultures, because of the race they're inside. And I can appreciate their different cultures and I can appreciate who they are. So I don't at all even really, it depends on how you see race. Race obviously can carry racism, but race can carry a sense of realizing what has happened and reconciling with that and deciding that I'm not going to fall victim to just thinking that Brittany is Black and that's all there is to her. And what I think Black is all that she is. Like, it takes an individual choice for this. And we've talked. I mean, we've talked for, I don't know how long it's been. It's been a while, and I don't brush off what you say. So I want to make sure that's clear to you and to everyone else. I don't think, well, I think the way I think and she's wrong. No, I have conversations about what we talk about. And I even tell my friends, like, she makes perfect sense on this thing. And I say, and it's weird because the language she uses to describe the thing, it's like we agree with the thing, but we're using different ways to describe how we feel about it. So, and I'm almost thinking then what's the point? Like, if we both want, in a sense, the same thing, which is for people to judge people on their character, then, and I do that. And I would say the reason why I can have this conversation with you and other people and why I have this platform, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but maybe one reason why you reached out is because you saw an openness or maybe a peak of hope of openness that maybe this person in good faith will hear me out. And especially because I'm Black. And it was because of, what the story that you had, in your background, your resume, and like how earnest you were, that when I read the email, it was like, I completely agree with this. And now I was like, I disagree with this, but this is something that might be fruitful for other people to see. And then when we had our discussions, even though they got whatever lively in a fun way, I would say, I was like, but this is something I want to do. Because at the net of it all, and I know Black, I know you're not Black. You don't, I'm just saying this in context of the article I have. The Free Black Thought piece that I have, I champion all Black voices, even the voices that don't agree with me, even the voices that don't assign themselves to Black, but that are physically someone that I believe is in my community. I know you don't subscribe to that. I'm just saying. So that's one reason why, a major reason why I wanted to do this with you. Because I think what you're saying, and the more we talk about certain things that I was confused about, it makes sense, right? But like I said in the piece that I have with our skin problem, I think because I have brown skin, because you have light brown skin, because someone has white skin or whoever, that is where race is. Like, race is in the skin. When someone sees me, they don't see, oh, she's a brown girl. No, my brown skin signifies I'm a Black person. Your brown skin signifies you're Black, no matter if you don't subscribe to it or not. If someone said that, and of course this isn't you because you would never do this, everyone, so I'm just using an example. If someone said, oh, someone shoplifted at CVS and she had a curly afro, light skin, Black shirt, whatever, headphones, you probably weren't wearing those headphones, but whatever, they aren't going to ask you if you subscribe to being Black, that you are Black to them. They're going to, if they see you and they're going to take you into questioning, they're like, she has a Black shirt, she has curly hair, she's Black, there we go. Society treats and legitimizes race for us. Like, even if today I decide not to be Black, out in the world I am. So it's like it's a losing war. It's a losing battle. And it's not even a battle I find necessary. I find it that, okay, we're Black, we're white, they did this thing, it sucks. You know what? It's unfortunate that this even had to happen, but it happened. And now what are we going to do? And that's the same way as I see sin. I see it like, it sucks. We weren't there, BC when all this was, but you know what? This is what life is now. We have to choose who we serve. So what are we going to do? Because God doesn't care that we didn't bite no apple. He gave us what we need to do to serve him. And it's plain as day. And you can choose or not choose. It's your choice. And the same with participating with racial reconciliation. It's people's choice at the end of the day. I hope people would want that, but there's people that don't want it. They don't care. So that is why I am for race identity. It's not like I'm for it, like I'm tethered, like, no, I want everyone to be separated, or I want everyone to be white and Black. We're in our boxes. No, I just see it as an inevitable reality that's not going to change. But the thing we can change is our minds. And the way we can change our minds is critically thinking of how we see someone. That when I see someone white or Black or Asian or Middle Eastern, that whatever pops in my mind that is an assumption of who they are, and I have never even spoken to them, and it's disparaging on their character, which I don't even know yet, that is on me to change. That is what I can change. I can do that. And Jordan Peterson said, I can clean my room. I can do that. People can do that. They can clean up how they think about other people. And that is how you can really get to a realistic way of getting racism as close on the edge of this nation's mindset on how we operate and treat each other, even though it'll never fall off the cliff, it'll still be around. But if we do that actively, which takes work every day, I think that is where we get rid of racism. I don't think me not not identifying with being Black, which is something that it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter if I decide to identify as Black. That is how the world sees me. That's how I'm described. When I was born, they checked Black. They didn't check, well, we'll wait until she decides. No, they check Black because I am. And there's nothing wrong with being Black. There's nothing wrong with being white. There's nothing wrong with being Asian. There's nothing wrong with being Middle Eastern or Native American. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. If anything, I'm intrigued with all of these different types of people. And that can be a leeway in getting to know who they are, is to start with that. And I say this respectfully. If your answer isn't an absolute yes, racelessness is the way to get rid of racism, period. And again, respectfully, I ask, then what's the point of aiming toward a raceless society if the end game isn't, well, this theory is going to help us rid racism, people. If that's not the end game and you're like, well, we can push it out as much as possible, that's exactly what I'm saying as well. So I guess why aim for racelessness? Why aim for that for America?
So for me, we already are raceless, which makes it the realistic path to go because we already are raceless. And that's the thing that we've been focusing primarily on the eliminativist aspect of my thinking and my philosophy, but the skepticism aspect is something that I'm sure we'll talk about next time in part 2. And that is the thing that more people should, I feel like, be educated on. Because as a skeptic, that means that I acknowledge and can concede and see I have a mind that operates that some people think that race is a social construction, right? Dr. Carter, my mentor, included, that race is a social construction. And also some people think that it is of nature. So they're naturalists in that way, even though it's been disproven and it hasn't been proven yet to be of nature. That's how some people think. I am a skeptic. I take the third and final position in terms of what I think race is. And because I see racism masquerading as race in society, in that way, for me, race does not exist. People just think it exists. But the thing that people point to as race, as I've tried to, like, we've barely scratched the surface, but as I've tried to indicate through this talk, is like everything else except race. And if we were able to like unlock something in ourselves to really see that, then we would recognize that indeed we are raceless, and that the thing that's operating nefariously, causing violence on us, is racism through race. And so the idea that this can't be negated just because it's been in existence for so long, in terms of human history, 4 or 5 centuries is actually a very short time. And if we look at other spaces, we would find that race is relative, and that therefore racism is relative. Race and racism, they don't operate the same place everywhere. Americans, I think we like to tell that story over and over and over again, that white supremacy is everywhere, that racism is everywhere, that anti-Black racism is everywhere, which again, I feel like is the same as racism, is the same as white supremacy. We convince ourselves that it's global. But if we actually analyze other societies, even in different decades or different centuries, Africa before colonization, we would see that people might be racialized in these other spaces, but that racialization looks and feels and operates and is different. So if that's the case, then I think we should give ourselves more credit, and consider the very real possibility that more people would be easily persuaded, to recognize society, to recognize human beings as being raceless. That in that recognition, again, nothing is actually erased except the idea of race, which inadvertently upholds racism. And I mean, not for nothing, we already have people who are persuaded in colorblindness. We have people like Angela Davis, Jane Elliott, who talk about there's one race, the human race. We have countless African Americans, some of which you've named a few times, which made me smile. Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston, James Baldwin, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X at the end of his life before he was assassinated. All of these people at different points in their careers and in their writings point to skepticism or constructionism and eliminativism. And the reason why we so far haven't negated racism, which is my word, I'll spell it. It's RACE parentheses ism parentheses, right? I make it one word. The reason why we haven't negated that thing isn't because we can't or because we're so far entrenched or whatever. It's because the people like myself who have voiced alternative methods and strategies of resistance, strategies for liberation, all of that have been continuously marginalized, excluded, silenced. Texts have gone out of print for decades and decades and decades, probably a lot more than we've even recovered fairly recently, like since the 90s. Those parts of their teachings, the people I just named, aren't talked about, aren't taught, aren't emphasized, aren't underscored if it is in print. The thing that's always promoted with all of the figures I mentioned is this race pride. This idea of indeed Black and Blackness was because we're talking primarily about racialized Black people. And that is not a coincidence. That part of their thinking isn't squashed or swept under the rug because they're crazy, because it's impossible. It's swept under the rug because it is absolutely dangerous toward really everyone on the spectrum of like race thinking, if you will, race ideology. Their ideas are perceived as dangerous, not because it would actually cause more problems than it would solve, but because the way of life that we have continued to prioritize and privilege and prefer, and I'm talking about all people, Brittany, people who look all different types of ways are included in this assertion. We haven't been willing to let go of the same thing that we're fighting against. We haven't been willing to do it. And people since the 1800s, African Americans, Elaine Locke, Hurston, very early in her career and then again late in her career, have said and criticized and questioned and critiqued this idea of race pride, regardless of what race you're from. This idea that what connects people is their skin color, which I think you're right. A lot of people, that's what they equate race to, was like how a person looks, their phenotype. And that's precisely the problem, because race is not biological. It doesn't exist biologically. And if it's culture and ethnicity we're talking about, then we should be clear to rename it, reconsider the language and how we describe it, to talk about those things and stop using the language that continues to separate us today, continues to keep us divided. It's very unintentional, and people are very well intentioned. And that's why I try to, for fear of sounding patronizing, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying I extend grace to myself and I try to extend grace to other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a necessary part of this process, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason,
Okay.
like, the reason why these conversations are, I think, necessary and important is there are a lot of reasons, but although we agree on, I think, really fundamental things and fundamental aspects and ideas, but we disagree with the sort of final strategy, if you will, I'll put that in air quotes, for how
Mm-hmm.
to overcome these obstacles or certain problems in society. The reason it's important is because the the strategy that keeps getting promoted and that the positionality that you currently hold is the same strategy that we're taught from young children to hold, and it hasn't worked yet. We've
I
made
would
progress.
disagree. I would
We've
disagree. This
well,
isn't my this what how I think about myself now is not how I was brought up. Like, let's just say in school of how I was supposed to see myself or in society. This was intentional and active way of untangling myself from what of how I used to think about myself, of how I was supposed to be as a Black person. This is
I'm just
not at
talking about
all.
the reconstruction part, the idea that we can reconstruct race to be something that's less nefarious, but still operate within our racial or race identities. That idea is something that countless people before us in this country have hold, and countless people today continue to hold. And so it's not a new strategy, right? Like, we've continued to try to do that. And you brought up critical thinking, which I think is essential for so many reasons, like beyond racism, right? That is essential too. That is also part of the consistent strategy, is like, oh, if we get the education piece of people better, then that will go a long way toward the end goal. And I think that's true. But I think it's also true that people should be educated and exposed to this information that America writ large continues to keep hidden from us, from them. And we should really, I would want people to really question and wonder about and research, why is it that this information is being hidden from us? Because listen, I'm not one for conspiracy theories. Actually, I kind of am.
Mm,
But to me, it's not an accident. It's not accidental. We are meant to feel like we are always having to operate within race. And the unfortunate outcome of that is the persistence and continuation of racism, which is why I am very vocal about my ideas at this point, even for fear of being misinterpreted or people like really strongly disagreeing with me, which you've been very respectful and kind and open. But it's like, I see the history of how it's happened to countless African Americans before me and plenty of other people too. And that is why this conversation is essential, because maybe not everyone, you don't have to be a skeptic to agree with the eliminativist portion. And you can be a reconstructionist and be an eliminativist. You could, because essentially that is a form of reconstruction if we're trying to reconstruct it out of how I define ourselves in a lot of ways. And so, like, the other philosophies of race, for very important reasons, I think more people should be exposed to, and then they can, of course, decide for themselves. Um, but one need not be a skeptic to see the value of eliminativism. And also, I think it's true that one need not be a skeptic or an eliminativist to benefit from momentarily adopting those positionalities after a bit of education and information. Because even if we just adopt those positionalities temporarily, especially the skepticism part, I've literally led hundreds of people through learning to where, because they were able to step outside of themselves, their own very strong beliefs in Reconstruction primarily, they were able to have better and more productive conversations. And they were able to think more critically, because they, even just if it was in the space of the class or the workshop, they were able to separate the category that they apply to themselves or that society applies to them, because there's two ways that we are racialized. And in that removal, racialized white people were better equipped and able and empowered to not feel defensive about the thing that's being talked about, right? And racialized Black people or other racialized people of color were better able to also have a more in-depth conversation, by even if that came through not applying whiteness to the classmate that's right next to them. It's like, I can't even begin to tell you the value that has had on people. And I've witnessed it and I've led it. And it wasn't even, I didn't even go into teaching or go into this work with that at the forefront of my mind. At the forefront of my mind was just like social justice, like that's what it was. And I found that as a strategy, that works. And if they leave the class or the workshop and they're right back to their Reconstructionist views, which is again, I think it's the default, it's the most common position for Americans, that's fine. But they have literally all expressed how transformative the opportunity was and how it got them to think 100% differently about racism and race in the most positive and generative ways. And I think that that's all, like, that should not be, whether we agree or disagree on the strategies, just as a strategy for helping healing and helping more deeper learning and helping people really actually think more critically. I think it's something that we would do well to consider adopting in more spaces where we really want to make change.